Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, welcome to the end of month Q&A video for April 2023. And we're going to dive straight in this month with a comment from Johnny M, who says, "Great vid, thanks for the update. Put your health and well-being first, my friend. We'll always be here. Take care." Well, thank you very much, Johnny, and that's unfortunately what I've had to do for the last few months, really, but especially in April. It's been a very, very tricky month for me for various reasons. Health and well-being have not been at an all-time high, let's just say that. So, yeah, I've been trying to make as much content as I possibly can, but I've had to prioritise other things more often than not. I have actually made a fair few videos in April, but they're going to be out in May for various scheduling reasons with manufacturers. So there is plenty of content coming soon. I think there was 1 or 2 videos in April. Sorry for that, I've just had to put the rest of my life first, unfortunately. It's just the way it goes sometimes. But thank you for the kind words. The SJK Experience. When is Flat Eric going to show himself? Yes, take care of yourself first. Without health, you have nothing. Remember, the best is worth waiting for. We'll be here. Well, thank you again for the sentiment. In terms of Flat Eric, I was going to grab him, actually. Bear with me a second. So, this is Flat Eric here. If you were, like me, alive in the 1990s, you might remember this guy from the Levi Jeans advert. And I've had him since the 90s. I had him when I was a young kid. And all of my other sort of soft toys from childhood over the years have been binned or fed to the dog or something. But I've always held on to this guy. He just makes me smile. So he tends to sit on the mixing console behind me there. And occasionally he gets spotted and people ask what that puppet is. Well, this is the puppet, it's Flat Eric. So he gets a bit of a cameo in the Q&A today. He's got a bell toy to his wrist. I'm not really sure why, but there we go. There's Flat Eric. But yes, thank you for the kind words as well. Jacob Angel. I've been waiting for a video to come out about this pedal. Thank you so much. Well, this is the Mooer Audio Morph Tone EQ, a very, very powerful tone shaping pedal. And it is absolutely fantastic. So I'm glad to be, I think, probably one of the first ones on YouTube besides Mooer Audio to actually put out a video about this thing. It's a very, very clever piece of kit. I was actually meaning to do it in April and just haven't got around to it. I'm going to, in May, do a short edit of that video because I think it was about 40 minutes or so. It was very in-depth about everything this pedal can do, which is fine. Some people like the long format stuff, especially when there's a lot to explain, and people do sort of skip through it as well to the bits they want to see. But sometimes it's nice to do a dedicated short edit, just very short and punchy, just showing the interesting things you can do with a piece of gear. So I'm going to aim to do that in May because it's a brilliant piece of kit and it's definitely worthy of a little bit more airtime. Enrico Palazzo. Hi Joe, I have a few questions for the next Q&A. There's 3 here. Number 1, we as musicians strive for the most efficient equipment, but I was reading some interesting facts about Brian Setzer's rig. He uses an old Fender 61 Bassman, and the interesting fact that instead of using high quality tubes, he uses Chinese tubes that are less efficient so he can achieve amp saturation earlier. That was a quite interesting fact. So my question is, would you try something like that with your JTM 45? I'll do the 2 other questions in a second. Everything's a system when it comes to your guitar rig, and there's no correct answers with any of it. Yes, we tend to go for the most efficient with certain things, but with amplifiers especially, very often the less efficient designs are kind of the ones that people tend to gravitate towards. So my Dr. Z Master, for example, the kind of Joe Walsh's 310 Bandmaster, that uses a cathodiene phase inverter rather than the long-tailed pair of the blackface designs. What that actually means, I don't really know, but it's a less efficient phase inverter, so you get kind of less power out of it, but you get much more sort of harmonic richness out of it, according to Dr. Z anyway. So it's a less efficient design, it's much more simple, it's not what like an electronics engineer would do if you're going for kind of ultimate efficiency, but it sounds amazing. And the same can be true for tubes as well. So if you have an amp and you want saturation at slightly lower volumes, you don't want a super high headroom clean amp, then yes, lower gain tubes could be absolutely what you want. So especially with amplifiers, there's no kind of rules really. It's whatever works for you and whatever you're trying to get out of a piece of gear. If you're using bright sounding tubes, in some amps that might make everything sound a bit shrill, but if you've got a particularly dark amp, a bright sounding tube might give you that 5% extra top end that really makes it work for you. So there are no rules at all. So it's interesting to hear that Brian Setzer was using some lower gain tubes to get his amp to break up at slightly lower volumes, and I would certainly do something like that as well. With my JTM 45, it's currently running on the Tung Sol reissue KT66s, which sound great in that amp. When they eventually burn out and break, then, I mean, tubes are in short supply anywhere in the world at the moment because of various political situations, so I guess it will depend on what tubes I can get my hands on. But I wouldn't be against trying a sort of slightly more squishy lower gain tube in that amp to get a bit more saturation. I do actually have a few pairs of the Genelex Gold Lion reissue KT66s squirreled away in the cupboard just in case the tube situation lasts longer term. So I've probably got enough tubes for my JTM 45 to last me the next 20-30 years, because I really want to keep that amp running because it's just my favourite amp I've ever played. But I'm always up for experimenting with things like tubes, 100%. Question 2 from Enrico. I was listening to one of the That Pedal Show Q&As. They were talking about analog delays. Mick said something like this: there is no point in using analog delay if it doesn't have modulation. I know you use the Analog Man delay and have a couple of analog delays with modulation, the Meat Maud and the ADG1. Do you think modulation is a necessity in analog delays? It's actually really tough to find a simple analog delay with an analog modulation circuit in it. It's surprisingly hard to find. You can get things like the Asheville ADG1, which is an analog delay with an analog modulation circuit, but it's just got the most ridiculous feature set. It's great, but it's a very complicated delay. In terms of like a simple 3-knob analog delay with modulation, you've got the carbon copy with the modulation button. And beyond that, especially in the boutique world, it's really difficult to find a simple analog delay with modulation. But I wouldn't say it's a necessity, really, because for me, the reason I love analog delays is because they're dark on the repeats. So they tend to kind of sit underneath what you're playing, rather than digital delays can be a little bit clean and sort of pokey and spiky, and they tend to sort of take over what you're playing. Whereas analog delays tend to sort of mush together with everything, thicken it out, but not kind of overpower what you're trying to play. So for me, that's why I love analog delays. And remember things like the DM2, or all the clones of the DM2 that have been over the years, the old Ibanez, or is it Ibanez? Can't remember, the pink AD80, I think it was Ibanez. They're great analog delays that I love dearly that don't have modulation. So a lot of classic analog delays haven't had modulation, and yet people absolutely love them. So I wouldn't agree with Mick on that, in that you have to have modulation, but it's nice to have. I remember trying out the Supro delay, and it was a cool sounding delay, but I really wanted modulation in that pedal. And yeah, it's true for a lot of pedals, really. It's nice to have the option, but I wouldn't say it's the be-all and end-all, really. And question number 3. I have never seen you with an ODR1. Why is that? I think it's a really underappreciated overdrive that works better than his green cousin, the Tube Screamer. I've never tried an ODR1, which is kind of sacrilege, really, as someone who's into pedals. I would really like to, because whenever I've heard people playing them, they do sound great. I think the original chap who designed it still makes his own version of it. I think it's called Norland or something like that. They look really cool. There's various different versions of the ODR1 circuit with, you know, more or less features that I'd love to try out at some point. So I might have a snout around on eBay and see if I can pick one up second hand at some point. But I'd love to try an ODR1. I can't believe I haven't, really. I'm sure I've probably tried an overdrive pedal at once upon a time. There's probably a clone of it or something, but I've never tried one to the best of my knowledge. So I'll have to put that right at some point soon. 100 flowers. Out of interest, did you set up the amp so that the toasted sounded right? I guess you did, else why buy them? And then use the high gains with the same settings. If you did, it would be equally interesting and educational to hear the comparison with the amp set to bring out the best of the high gains. It's actually very much the other way around, because I had the high gains in originally, shot that footage, so I had to set the amp up to sound good with the high gains, and then put the toasters in. So the amp was kind of set for the high gains, really. So there's also various other videos that I made before swapping the pickups out with my Rickenbacker where the amp was specifically set to work with the high gains. So best go back and watch some of those other videos to hear the high gains on their own. It's always a bit of a weird one when you're doing a comparison video, especially with a piece of gear that you're not 100% sure how it's going to sound, because you do have to kind of guess a little bit what the replacement piece of gear is going to sound like, and then try and sort of find a happy medium where the amp works with both sets of gear. So in that that instance, the high gains are much darker sounding and a bit more kind of thumpy in the lower mid-range. The toasters, just from listening to lots of examples of toaster pickups on YouTube, are thinner, scoopier, and more chimey in the top end. So when I was setting the amp, I probably set the amp a tiny bit darker with the high gain than I would have, knowing I was going to put some brighter pickups in. Otherwise, the toasters might have just sounded really shrill and harsh and whatever. There is a little bit you can do with that when balancing out the mics in Pro Tools, so you can kind of find a happy medium where they both sound good, but the differences are still highlighted. There's no point doing a comparison video like that where you make one version of the guitar, in this instance, sound amazing and the other sound terrible, because that doesn't really tell you anything. It just shows the differences and you're kind of biasing the overall sound towards one. So I try and find a happy middle ground where both sound good, but you can still hear exactly how they're similar and different. But yes, I shot the high gain footage first and set the amp to work with the high gains in that video. But go back and watch those other videos if you want to hear just the high gains. Believing Barry. Okie doke. I got my Mark Foley 60 set a couple of years ago now. Done experimenting, this is it for me. And I think it's kind of a similar story for me, really. I've tried lots of different pickups in my Strat over the years, not just because I haven't liked things, it's just experimenting with different eras of Strat tone and all that sort of stuff. The Foleys just sound right. They sound amazing, and no part of me wants to change anything about it. The setup, the pickups, the pots, the cap, whatever. Don't want to touch that guitar because it just sounds amazing now. And yeah, I think the Foleys have kind of ended my Strat pickup journey. They are just the best Strat pickups, or my favourite Strat pickups I've ever tried. They sound absolutely killer, so I never really want to take them out of that guitar. Certainly never get rid of those pickups. I might try them in a different Strat, but yeah, I think they're kind of life of pickups for me. They're absolutely incredible things. Stuart Hayseth. I think that's probably how you pronounce it with the accent, but I'm probably getting it very wrong. What is the Vajra amp? I can't seem to find any info on it from Google. Well, I did make a video all about that amplifier where I kind of told the full story of how I came to own it and where it came from. The very short answer is, back in, I'm guessing, the early 2000s, when the internet kind of really came into its own, there was a forum, and still exists online, called 18 Watt, which is a kind of hobbyists forum, first and foremost, where people share schematics and amp building tips and stuff. And there was a chap who joined that site very early on called Mark Durham, and he was a real genius in terms of amp design. I think lots of his schematics he dreamt up of, like modified Marshall circuits, are still floating around on that forum to date, and people still build amps to his specifications. But he didn't really, as far as I'm aware, build too many amplifiers himself. He was more kind of into helping others with their sort of hobbies. But he did build a few, and the Vajra is an amp that he built. Vajra was the sort of brand name he used. So I'm guessing it was never properly registered or anything, but that's just the name he stuck on his amps and his schematics. He gifted this amplifier to a chap, I think his name was Colin, based up in Scotland. So that's how it kind of came over to the UK. And sadly, shortly after that, Mark passed away in a car accident. And the chap in Scotland held on to the amp for however many years it was, and eventually listed it on eBay, and I bought it. So that's how I ended up with it. But when I took it to my local amp tech just to kind of check over, I think it was also to put the KT66s in because it was running on 6L6s when I bought it. He looked at it and serviced it and did the rebiasing for the tubes. And he said he looked at the components and how it was made. He was like, this is like matchless quality. Everything is just as good as it can be. And it certainly sounds like that as well. So for something I picked up for a few £100s on eBay, it's just become my favourite amp. I've got amplifiers here that, in monetary terms at least, are worth sort of 7 or 8 times what I paid for that amp. I just love it. It's so good. I use it for 90% of my demos. It takes pedals incredibly well. It sounds wonderful cranked. It's just my amp. I absolutely adore the thing. So that's what the Vajra amp is. Watch that full video if you want to hear the full story and all the sort of things I was able to screenshot from the internet and stuff like that. But wonderful, wonderful amplifier. Dr. Claw78. A lot of great usernames today. Joe, quick question. What do you recommend as an always-on tone enhancer? An EP3 style like this, or the Chase Tone, or a tube boost like the Effectrate Firebottle or Kingsley Page? If it helps, I like rougher, gnarlier single coil sounds with a good amount of ring. Not interested in smooth. Thanks for everything as ever. Well, for me, my always-on kind of clean buffer line driver pedal is the Audio Kitchen Small Trees, which is a similar thing to the Effectrode Fire Bottle. But the reason I like that is it's very kind of clean and, dare I use the word, transparent. It's not kind of edgy, it doesn't really add any gain on its own, it just buffers the sound in a really lovely way, adds a bit of character and boosts it into the amp a bit. It depends when you want sort of rough, gnarly sounds, exactly how you're going to use the boost, because if you're using the boost to kind of push the front end of your amp a little bit harder to get the sort of preamp tubes squishing a bit, you can almost use any sort of clean boost for that. It doesn't matter too much because all you're doing is boosting the level and making the amp do the heavy lifting. But if you're wanting a little bit of gain and extra character from the pedal on its own, then yes, something like the Kingsley Page would be amazing. That pedal works incredibly well with all guitars really, but single coils especially. It has that kind of lower mid tube screamy type thing going on. But it's great at low gain. It can be a clean boost, it can add a little bit of hair, a bit of extra squish. It can kind of do everything that you're after. So yeah, if you're after a bit of gain from your pedal and extra character and saturation, you can't really do too much better than the Kingsley Page. The Fire Bottle is amazing too, but that's just a clean boost. It doesn't gain up on its own. It's designed to push your amp. So for dedicated standalone gain, you really can't go wrong with the Kingsley Page, I don't think. So yeah, that would be my shout out of everything on that list. PD. This is quite a beautiful excursion. As much as gear can be interesting, once in a while, actually hearing some great playing reminds us what it's all about. Thank you for posting this. So this is one of the 2 videos I think I put out in April, which was a song, and I'm doing my best this year to write a bit more music, and it's never particularly profound music. It's usually demoing a piece of gear or something and just writing a song based around what that gear kind of sounds like it wants to play. So I've been trying to write bits of that. I've got another song coming out in May, which is based around a particular manufacturer and an amp and some pedals that they make and are coming out very, very soon. If you're watching this video on release day, I'll tell you more about that at the end of the video. So I'm just trying to write more. The song stuck. It wasn't particularly about any piece of gear, really. As I said, April was a very tricky month for me, and for the first time in however many years, it wasn't really like writing music by numbers and kind of putting a chord here and writing what the melody should be there and doing it all kind of cognitively. It actually felt like I had something to say for once. So I just kind of put that piece of music together in like an afternoon really, and left the mix pretty rough. It was just as it came out and just kind of threw it out there. And there's another comment about the song here actually from Tubesteader, who makes some amazing tube pedals as well. So going back to the previous question, if you're after a kind of edgy, sort of gnarly pedal, something like, if I can find it, for a Fendery type thing, the Tubesteader Eggnog is a wonderful kind of low gain, squishy, characterful pedal if you're wanting to add a bit of kind of always on squish. So definitely worth checking out some Tubesteader stuff as well. But Ollie at Tubesteader said, "Nice tune, Joe, feels very personal." And yeah, it was, that song. It was kind of something I needed to write. It's a very simple piece of music in so many ways, but yeah, very tricky month, and just kind of felt I needed to, you know, put something down on paper, as it were. So a lot of nice comments about that song. I'm glad it was well received, because it wasn't my usual thing of writing it around a piece of gear or whatever. It was just something I wrote for me and put it out there, and I'm glad the response has been nice. But yes, there's more music coming. I'm doing my best to write more this year. Fibitran 5, whatever that is. What emoji is that? Is that the clapping emoji? And then Y50 Lux. Well, this, if you've watched the channel for a while, is a guitar that started life as a 1990... what year is it? It's on the sticker. 1996 Japanese-made 52 reissue. And it was a real workhorse telly for me. You'll have seen this in its original form on the channel loads over the years. But then I got my Roncorn Barn Buster, which I'll talk about in a minute as well. And it just ran rings around this guitar. This was a bit of a handful in comparison. So I wanted to do something different with this guitar. I didn't want to sell it, I wanted to change it up. And eventually Matt at Monty's put the new Monty's wide range humbuckers in and did all the modifications. There's a very long video if you want to check out exactly what work was done to this guitar. And when I did this design, because I kind of designed this and mocked it up on Photoshop, bits of it did change. I think like the pickguard shape changed a little bit to cover over screw holes and things, but mostly it was my design. What I wanted this to be was kind of a Tele Deluxe in a sense, because it's got the wide range humbuckers, the Perloid pickguard, but the Tele Deluxe tends to have 4 controls like a Les Paul, and the pickguard goes all the way around here. It looks quite plasticky to me. But this was a 52 Tele, so I wanted to kind of make it a mashup of the 2 eras. So we chopped down the original, or this is the Callahan Tele bridge, the 52 style, kept the kind of original control layout rather than going to the 4, but then did the Perloid pickguard and the wide ranges. And the 50 Lux thing, it was actually Matt at Monty's who came up with the idea, and just kind of said it in passing, because I said to him, like, it's like a mashup of the 2 great eras of Tele. It's like 50 and the Tele Deluxe. He goes, yeah, it's like a 50 Lux. And I didn't really like the word, so I just kind of ran with it, and it's become known as the 50 Lux. So, yeah, that's where that name came from. But I absolutely love this guitar. I was almost worried that because the wide range humbuckers are a later era than I typically go for, I go for like 1950 through to 61 with a kind of Les Paul SG type thing. That's where I tend to live. These were 1970s, I think, the wide ranges, so I was a little bit worried I wasn't going to like them, but it's just become one of my absolute favourite guitars. I love how it looks. It's super unique, and yeah, I wanted to kind of mash up the 2 eras, because if I was just going to create a Tele Deluxe, you might as well just go and buy a Tele Deluxe. There's no point hacking up a 52 reissue. So I wanted it to be its own thing, and I liked the idea of marrying what it was with what it now is. Those 2 kind of eras of Tele, and just shoving them together and having nods to both of those Teles in one instrument. So yeah, that's the 50 Lux, and it was Matt that came up with that term just in passing, and I kind of liked it, so stuck with it. Enrico Palazzo again. Amazing track, Joe. In my mind, I heard a beautiful shimmer reverb in the 50 Lux track, even though there wasn't any reverb. It might have had a little bit of reverb added to that guitar part in Pro Tools, but the main kind of ambience you were hearing was the Asheville ADG1 going into the Meet Mods, are 2 ambient analog delays running into each other and kind of feeding off each other and creating the kind of washy soundscape thing. So that's the ambience sort of shimmery stuff you were hearing on that. Joe, have you seen the T-Rex Binson Echo Rec recreation at NAMM? I want to hear your opinion on it. I love it. If it's robust enough, I'm tempted to jump on it and sell a bunch of delay pedals. I've seen 1, maybe 2 videos on it. It looks very interesting. I don't know a huge amount about it and where it came from and how they developed it and everything, but I'd love to find out more. It looks really, really cool. And yeah, original Echo Rec sound incredible. So it's always hard to tell at NAMM. It's a very low volume with someone shoving a mic, and you get more kind of racket from everything else everyone's playing in that venue than what you're actually hearing. So it's hard to hear subtleties and nuances. I'd love to hear some more kind of in-depth demos of it, because it looks like a very, very cool piece of kit. Who is Michael Moshos? When a perfect sounding Tele becomes perfecter. Awesome, Joe. So this was another big video this month. This is the Roncorn Barn Buster, and I posted a little teaser picture on the community section on the channel with the new pickups that finally arrived for this guitar after a year of waiting. Most people guessed Ron Ellis, and pretty good shout. These are the Don Mare Hot Bakelite set that I was quoted 4 to 6 months for, and it ended up taking literally nearly a year. But they are stunning, these pickups. I absolutely love these things. This guitar now sounds right to me. It sounds like a kind of early 50s Blackguard. It is absolutely wonderful. So yeah, before someone commented saying that this guitar with the Bill Lawrence microcoils was the most perfect sounding Tele they've ever heard, I now prefer it. Those pickups were great, but these are special. And this whole guitar now is just unbelievable. I absolutely love this thing. So you're going to be seeing the Roncorn Barn Buster a lot more now that it's got the Don Mare pickups in it, because it's just become one of my absolute favourite guitars I own. A stunning piece of kit. And finally this month, Alejandro Ricky, I think. Nyop, Nop and Nop. A Rickenbacker is a Rickenbacker only with this original parts. Sorry, mister, and others like Peter Buck that use bronze. More respect for such a great design, and play, play, play. All Ricks sound better and better the more you use it. The more years, blah, blah. What confused me a little bit about this comment is you clearly hate the idea of modding a Rickenbacker, and yet you're on YouTube watching specific Rickenbacker mod videos. I don't think I'm your target audience, so go and watch something that you actually like, because you're clearly not going to like a Rickenbacker mod video. It always makes me smile, like when people click on things they clearly are against, and then comments saying they're against it. Watch something else. I'm not the only person on YouTube, thank God. So yeah, go watch something that makes you happy, please. Anyway, that's the end of the questions for April. So again, sorry for a slightly lower video output. There's plenty more coming in May. There's a few videos coming with highlight electronics. There's various bits of kit. If you're watching this on release date tomorrow, the 1st of May at midday UK time, there's kind of a world exclusive really, some new products that Highlight are bringing out that I'm very happy to unveil to the world. There's a new song coming that I said is going to be based around all those new Highlight products, and an amp that I have here on demo at the moment. Great sounding thing. And yeah, I'm just going to think what else might be coming. I'm going to do another pedal demo, and I've been meaning to do for a few months actually, just haven't done it, so I finally need to demo that. And yeah, just looking forward to trying to get back into videos. Hopefully my life will calm down a little bit. Things will become less stressful. I'll be in a much better headspace to actually be able to spend a day or two working on the video. And yeah, it's just been a very tricky time recently. So thank you for sticking with me and for all the kind words that you guys have sent through about it and me. Very much appreciated. But thank you for watching, folks. I love doing these Q&As, and thank you for all your very insightful questions. Any more questions, drop them in the comments underneath this video or comment throughout the next month. I always pick the most sort of interesting and the ones that will be most relevant to the most people and try to include them in the Q&A video. So thank you for engaging with the channel in the ways that you have been. So yeah, thanks folks, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.